Good morning. I'm John Caputo, Professor of Communication Leadership Studies here at Gonzaga University. With me on my left is Dr. Heather Crandall, Chair of the Department and Assistant Professor of Communication and Leadership Studies. And today we have our very special guest, Dr. Bren Murphy. Dr. Bren Murphy is our visiting scholar in residence for 2010, coming to Gonzaga to share with us her wealth of information and knowledge, help enlighten us a bit more on things that we don't have in our everyday conversation. So it's welcome to have Dr. Bren Murphy with us. Dr. Murphy, as Professor of Communication and Women's Studies and Gender Studies at Loyola Chicago, has been on that faculty nearly
27 years.
27 years. And I've had the good fortune of knowing Bren in a number of settings associated with the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities, and over that time we've come to appreciate each other and our work and what we do in Jesuit universities to bring a different kind of communication to our students, a different way of thinking about communication. And as part of that, she's here teaching a course for us with our graduate students or our MA students, and she's been in a number of environments here at the university. So welcome to you, Bren.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We're making this tape, having just a dialogue, a conversation with you about things that sort of matter to you, but also some things that we think that you might say that could help us with our own students, either now or because it's the miracle of tape and saving these images and these ideas, bringing them to our students over a long period of time. And as you know, we also have many of our students who are scattered all around the country, so this will be a way they can have access even if they couldn't have come to your class or your lecture. So we'll start with that. It's just sort of where we'd like to go. I think that maybe we'd start, Bren, with just a little bit about you and communication, how you got interested in it, and then how the women's studies part grew out of that whole thing. So just some...
Great.
Yeah, good.
So I'm sorry, that was the question?
That's the question. The question is, tell us how you got interested in studying communication.
Okay.
And then how
Great.
That developed.
Journey.
Okay, all right, fine. I became interested in communication in high school because I was a debater, and I was quite active in the Forensic League. I did debate, I did theater, I did oratory, I did extemporaneous speaking, and not to be self-aggrandizing, but I was really good at it, and won all sorts of awards, and decided that I wanted to find out more about that. So I went to Northwestern University, which is where I had actually done a summer as a debate student and fell in love with it. And so I started off at Northwestern University doing communication studies. Loved it so much that I stayed there, went on and got a master's degree actually in interpersonal communication, decided that I was really bad at quantitative research and switched over to rhetorical criticism. So that's how I developed as a communication scholar, to have a career in terms of communication research and teaching. I started off actually primarily interested in being a teacher. That's what intrigued me the most. And then during my doctoral studies, obviously became interested in research as well. Went back to Texas, which is where I'm from, taught high school for a while, really didn't like teaching high school in Texas, came back, and actually that's when I finished my dissertation and decided that I wanted to be a university professor.
And so how did that turn into the women and gender studies?
All right, again, this is sort of a circuitous route. I was teaching at Loyola University. I was teaching rhetoric, I was teaching persuasion, I was teaching public speaking, I was teaching interpersonal, and my chair at the time came up to me and said, all right, I've put you down for teaching gender and communication next semester. And I said, but I have no background in that. And he said, well, you're a woman. You talk to men. I said, well, yes, I do. So I spent the next several months reading for the first time about feminism and feminist criticism and feminist theory and how it intersected with communication, and again became fascinated by it. So that was how I got involved in gender and communication.
And also, like us, you're teaching in a Jesuit university. So does that play out at all in the way you teach or what you teach or how these subjects then are communicated to your students? Or yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love teaching in the Jesuit environment. I I try to incorporate what I think are essential principles of Jesuit education and their charism in everything that I do. Very early on at Loyola, I was sent to a conference and heard a Jesuit talk about what it meant to be involved in Jesuit education. And he said that Jesuit education must necessarily involve the intersection of theory and practice, that you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing and intellectually inquisitive, but you have to test it against real experience. And then you take that experience and it influences how you build theory. And that you do all of it with the idea that God is your hermeneutic, that you do it with a sense of something that is transcendent, that the knowledge is supposed to be used for something. And one of the things it's supposed to be used for is to make the world better. I mean, it sounds sort of corny, but that's exactly how I feel about education. And I think you can do that at other universities, obviously, but what I love in particular about teaching at a Catholic Jesuit university is that you can say that explicitly. Nobody is surprised when you talk about the intersection of faith and knowledge. And it doesn't have to be Catholicism. I mean, so at Loyola University, for example, we have a very strong Muslim population. We have a very strong Jewish population. And they take their faith seriously. And so you can talk about that. And that means a great deal to me.
For you, Bren, both in your primary, secondary school, but in your university years, did you have particular people who you saw as mentors or who you wanted to emulate in your teaching or your ideas? Or
I don't think of myself as having a mentor, and that's a real regret to me. I don't know whether it's because all of the teachers were male and they didn't get as close to the female students. I certainly had wonderful teachers. I certainly had people who I learned a great deal from. Lee Griffin, do you remember Lee Griffin?
Sure.
Who sort of invented the notion of group rhetoric and movement rhetoric. I hold him very dear. But nobody really they were intellectual mentors, but they weren't mentors in terms of a career. And I've seen the difference that makes when I talk to other people who speak about someone who took a particular interest in their career and how to develop the career. So, and maybe what I should say is, I think my career as a scholar just took a different route than normally people take. I mean, I didn't graduate and immediately start on a book and that kind of thing. What I did was immediately start on a family. And so, I don't know, that may be part of it too, that they just didn't know how to deal with that.
If I remember from our other conversations, then your actual first teaching was in a seminary.
Yes, it was.
Can you share some of that? Can you share some of that?
You may have to edit some of this out. Yes, my first job was teaching at the Chicago Seminary for diocesan priests. And it was wonderful. First of all, I met my husband there, who was studying to be a priest. But secondly, it
changed his mind, I guess.
He did, yes. But it really was wonderful. It was wonderful to me personally in terms of my faith, because I was one of those people that had raised Catholic and then went to college and just became very disenchanted with what was going on in the formal church. Dropped away, didn't do anything, went to Mass at Easter and Christmas, that kind of thing. And part of it was what I thought was a really insufficient intellectual basis in terms of what I was hearing in church homilies. It just seemed to be pretty shallow. And when I was at the seminary, I talked to very thoughtful, very good, articulate priests with whom you could have a decent conversation and you could ask challenging questions and they didn't just sort of dismiss you. And I started to read more deeply into theology and the history of Catholicism, and it brought me back into the church. Mm-hmm. So, and my faith is very important to me now, and I have to credit being in the seminary and learning that you don't have to be superficial and closed-minded to be an active Catholic. And so that's again something that's very special to me teaching at Loyola University. I'm surrounded by theologians, and again, people who take their faith seriously and who ask difficult questions. And I like that.
You know, yesterday we were talking with you with undergraduate students, and you mentioned one's career choice is a kind of calling. Many of our master's degree students think what they want to do is be a teacher, be a college professor if possible. Could you talk a little bit about that, both the calling idea and why you still do that, why you're still excited by teaching? Yeah.
Sure. At Loyola Chicago, and I think this is true across a number of Jesuit universities anyway, people have been starting to look at the word vocation and expand it beyond a religious calling. When I was growing up, vocation meant you wanted to be a nun or a priest. And now that word is increasingly being used to talk about whatever it is that you're called to do. So you may be called to be a veterinarian, you may be called to be a dentist, you may be called to be a teacher. And one of the definitions that they've been using is the intersection of your talents and the world's needs. So again, that notion of doing something meaningful, and it doesn't have to be medicine or teaching or social work or one of the obvious ones. It can be being called to be an accountant. But that notion that there really needs to be a personal connection between what you're doing and who you are, because that's the joy of doing it, and you will bring so much more to what it is that you do. I've always felt called to be a teacher ever since I was little. So as I said, I tried teaching in high school, and the only reason I didn't like teaching high school was the hall pass thing and having permission to go to the bathroom. That just seemed too restrictive. And I also wanted to learn more. And I would say that one of the things that's wonderful about being a college teacher in particular is that you can invent your own courses. If you're interested in something, if I'm interested in learning more about feminist film criticism, I get to say, I teach a class in it. I get to do that kind of research. And so that is part of what's continually renewing. I sometimes feel overworked, but I am never bored. So that I feel very, very fortunate in being able to do that. And every class you meet, I mean, you know this,
right.
Every class you meet has a slightly different personality, which is why I'm always nervous before I go in to teach the first time, because
You haven't met them.
I haven't met them, exactly. And I want to do well by them. I mean, I feel a really deep obligation to do well, to have this be a meaningful experience. I'm using their time. So that's part of what keeps me energized and keeps me going and passionate about what I'm doing.
I have a follow-up question. Last night you were talking to a group of people from the community and from academia, and we were talking about the intersection of popular culture or mass communication with how it matters to our lives. Can you speak a little bit more about your calling in relation to those two areas of what you try to bring to students' awareness and what you see in popular culture?
Sure. I'm not a believer, and I don't think anybody really believes this now, in that whole bullet theory of culture, meaning that you watch a film or you read a book and you're just sort of a zombie. You just can't resist it, and it changes you. I don't believe that's how culture works, but I do believe that popular culture in particular contributes to our notions of what we think of as normal and what we think of as acceptable and what we fear. And that because especially in 20th, 21st century America, we are surrounded by it. I mean, there are people walk around with earplugs, listening to stuff all the time. They walk into a room, they turn on the television. The Super Bowl, one of the Super Bowl ads, showed some poor man who was forced to go shopping with his wife, and to endure that hardship. He was supposed to buy a portable television and carry it around so he could watch sports while she was shopping. Completely ridiculous commercial.
Maybe not for men.
I guess not. I'll tell Joanna. And so I think it's very important to understand what's going on in culture. I mean, I'm not one of those people that disdains popular culture. I watch way too much reality TV. And I'm missing Project Runway tonight, by the way, so unless I have it on, Jack and Dance.
Yeah, Jack and Dance. You get it on there?
That's right. But I think it's important to be a critical consumer like you are of any kind of communication. I think it's important to understand how mass media is structured. I think it's important to know what the competing interests are. I think it's important to know that you can talk back to the cultural messages. And I think it's important to know that you can create your own. And so that's part of what I think is the intersection. It's teaching people, I think, to be better citizens of the world, to use another corny term, because especially, in a democracy, you have to think. You have to think critically. You can't just listen to the messages and take them at face value. And so I think it's terribly important as a teacher to be able to invite students into that conversation.
Mentioning that you can create your own messages, last night's discussion was a bit about a new documentary that you're making. In addition, in reviewing your CV, Curriculum Vitae, you actually, as long ago as I think 1991, have a documentary that you worked on in there as well. So obviously you've tried to find ways of expressing creatively ideas that you have a passion about, kind of outside the normal academic, write an article for a journal and get that published. Can you talk a little bit about those documentaries and why it is a passion for you?
Sure. I am not, as I said a couple of times before, I haven't taken a traditional scholarship route for a number of different reasons. I appreciate high-level abstract theory. I can incorporate it, but I don't think that way. The reason that I do the kind of research that I do and the way that I teach is to try to take the big ideas and relate them to something that everybody else can understand. I think of myself sometimes as a translator. That's what I do when I teach. What did Kenneth Burke mean? Well, all right, let's see. And can we relate it to something that people encounter in their daily life? Why is Bitzer's rhetorical situation such a useful concept? I think it's a wonderful concept, but I want people to be able to apply that to their own life as opposed to, again, reading about it just abstractly. So I got interested in documentary filmmaking because I wanted to find a medium that could reach a wide number of people that weren't going to pick up a scholarly text. And I wish that there were more outlets, or I could find more outlets to get ideas about communication and the ideas that I'm interested into more of the mainstream. It's back to that notion of the public discourse and the kind of conversations that people have. And there are some scholars who are very good at doing that.
Not very, but it's a small outlet, like you said. It's not the norm.
Right. So the impetus for the initial documentary was when Loyola University Chicago, which is a coeducational school, merged, which is a kind word for takeover, the only remaining Catholic women's college in the state of Illinois, Mundelein College. And when we learned about this, I was at Loyola at the time, we were introduced to some of the teachers that were going to be absorbed into our department. And there were two very feisty nuns who were going to come into our department, and they asked me what I thought of this merger, and I said something really stupid, like, well, I think it's great, we get more space. And one of them said, are you a feminist? And I said, well, yes, I am. And she said, well, you can't be much of one if you don't know the history of women's education in the United States. And I said, well, you're right. And if I don't know it, and I've been teaching in women's studies by that time for a long time, if I don't understand the debt we owe to not just Catholic women's colleges, but higher education with women, I bet a lot of other people don't know. And why don't we make a documentary that uses the tension over the merger? Because some of the students at Mundelein were very, very upset at this. Why don't we use that? Why don't we interview people, both at Loyola and at Mundelein, and why don't we put it in the context of the history of women in higher education in the United States as a way to say, this is important. You need to know this piece of history. And even if women's colleges are in decline in terms of overall number, I think it's important that we understand what they did and why they formed. Mm-hmm. So I don't shoot, I don't edit, I don't do sound, but I found people who could do that, and I did what I'm doing on my current documentary with. I do the research, I do the writing, I do the editing. I do the construction, the narrative, and I make sure that it happens. So I'm in essence the producer. So, we distribute it. I had a wonderful time doing research in women's college archives all over the country, and then sent them all copies of the documentary. So I'm not in it to make money. I'm in it to get the word out and about something that I'm interested in.
You know that Heather's comment, and you agreed that there is a small kind of outlet for this kind of material, and yet I think it's the challenge. I mean, one of my teachers, Peter Drucker, said universities as we know them will cease to exist in the next 30 years. So what did he mean? We also had a kind of a muse here at Gonzaga, a colleague and friend of ours named Bill Niggemeier, who always kept trying to bring the ideas of the university, but to the community. Mm-hmm. Could we quit talking to each other and putting on library shelves? Could we actually speak to ordinary people about everyday things that we could help to do it? So the challenge was, like last night, here's a town and gown kind of lecture. Now we have iTunes University. We have other avenues that we can seek to find this. Have you looked for other places you've tried to bring your scholarship to, or places you could bring an audience to it or bring your stuff to them?
The primary way that I have usually done this is through corporate consulting. And I got interested in corporate consulting for purely mercenary reasons. I could earn a lot more money more quickly in 3 days than I could teaching all of summer school. So, plus I got to stay in really nice hotels. So I started doing that, and it actually became very fulfilling. At first I started just doing presentation skills and decision-making skills and that kind of thing. But the more involved I got, the more special projects they gave me and the more I could invent things. And so I actually spent about 8 years doing workshops for major corporations on glass ceiling issues, because what was happening was they were hiring almost 50% women to 50% men, and then they would get to the mid-manager level and it would go down to about 30%, and then they would get to upper management and it would go down to 5. And they weren't firing these women, the women were leaving. And so they wanted to know why that was happening, because they were losing talent, and why that was happening and what they could do about it. And that was one of the most rewarding things I've done in terms of bringing my scholarship in gender and communication to an area where it might actually make a difference in some people's lives. So that's been my most successful attempt to do it. I'll tell you, one of my heroes is Deborah Tannen. I think she's done a great job of using research and then on communication and on gender and communication and getting it out into the public sphere. I mean, these are thoughtful books, they're supported by research, but they're also accessible.
Yeah, they're in Barnes & Noble or in wherever you
That's right.
go
Yeah,
to the
she said
bookstore.
bestsellers.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting you should bring her up, because I've brought her up before with Heather, particularly with undergraduate students who now think, oh, those are funny ideas, and
Really?
that these ideas don't resonate in their lives, and that this notion of male and female cultural communication differences is a
It's so last century.
It's like that's so, yeah, exactly. It's so last century, and so you're working with communication components of glass ceiling, other kind of things in these organizations. So then you bring up Tanner as a good example of citing some of this stuff.
Right.
So is she gone? Is it outdated? You're saying no. So what is it you're seeing?
I don't think it's gone. I think Tannen actually Tannen's work on gender and communication has been severely criticized by very serious feminist scholars who argue that this is not a gender divide and that she's just using too much anecdotal evidence. I understand that criticism, but I don't think, and I think she's tailored it a little bit in subsequent years. To say, she never argued that it was hardwired. She never argued that it was inevitable. She argued that for understandable sociological reasons, women are more
socialized.
Yes, she argued that women have more of a tendency, is the word I want to use, have more of a tendency to see communication as primarily relational, which doesn't mean that they can't do information exchanges, but they have a tendency to see communication as more relational, and that makes sense because if you still are sort of marginalized, particularly in corporations, I mean, and part of what you're valued for is your ability to make other people feel better, you're going to value relational communication, and you're going to become good at it. But we're talking about overarching, overlapping arcs. I mean, there are certainly times when I'm with my husband and the roles completely flip, and I'm the one saying, what is the point? Get to the point. And he's saying, can we just talk about this a little more? So I understand that it's not hardwired, but I still think that those approaches to communication are valid and worth talking about. And it's funny, try this with your students, because I have done this with mine, and I still get a good response. I'll say, when I was going to school a long time ago, I mean, I went far away from school, and this is when long-distance phone calls still cost a lot. But I would call home maybe once a month, and my father would get on the phone and he'd say, what are your grades? Do you need money? I love you. That was it. It was, 3 minutes tops. And then my mother would get on the phone, and we'd talk about my brothers, and we'd talk about the crabgrass, and we would talk about what she fixed for dinner the night before. This was not information I needed to know, but it was us touching one another, right? So, what did you talk about for so long? Oh, nothing. How could you talk about nothing for 45 minutes? Well, you can, if you think that there's a value in communication. And every time I tell that story, you can prove me wrong, but every time I tell that story, the men and the women in my class go, oh yeah, that's how it is when I talk to my mother and my father. So I think that Tannen's ideas are still valuable. And she didn't just write about gender.
No, I know that. How about some of these other things about this glass ceiling? Particularly, you refer to it as communication components of the glass ceiling. So could you share what some of those components are?
Sure. I believe very strongly that a lot of the glass ceiling is comprised not of intentional discrimination. I don't think men get in a room someplace and say, we will not promote Heather because she is a woman. I don't think that goes on. I think part of it is a degree of familiarity with the people that you're working with. And I had all sorts of stories told to me about male partners in this one organization who just felt, for good reasons sometimes, I mean, they're trying to be respectful, that they couldn't get as close to the women that were working for them as the men. So they would go to the men's offices and say, hey, want to go out for a beer? Want to watch a basketball game or whatever? Want to go with me to the hockey game? But they wouldn't do that to the woman. First of all, some of them, and this sounds so stereotypical, but these were the stories. First of all, their wives wouldn't like it. Right? Oh, I'm taking Heather out to the hockey game. You are. And
my wife would say, have a good time.
I know. But, and they didn't want it seen forward. They didn't know, some of them, this sounds strange, but this is an accounting firm. They didn't know what to talk to women about. Right. So they didn't get to know them better. And when you don't get to know people better, you don't have that cushion in which you can attribute a number of things that might be sort of outlying activities. So John, that's just John. He didn't mean to lose $1 million in that account. You got some context in which you can put people's activities. You don't know people, it's easier to attribute it to something else. And so they would just, we'll let John do this. So that the men were given better opportunities, again, not because of conscious discrimination. I think women felt that they couldn't go and talk to the partners about things that were bothering them. The whole family issue was difficult to talk about. One of my favorite anecdotes, actually, that somebody told me was, he said, all right, here's my story. First time I had a woman manager, she becomes pregnant. I'm very solicitous. I ask her all the time, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Do you need to lie down? Do you need some time off? And finally, she gets really mad, and she says to me, when did I stop being your best account manager and start being just the pregnant woman here? Don't talk to me about this. Just let me do my job. If I need something, I'll tell you. He went, okay, got it. pregnant woman, don't talk to her about it. So the next time a woman came in and became pregnant, he didn't mention it at all. And she's like, 8.5 months, and she goes to his office and she starts crying and says, I don't understand. I thought we were friends. And you haven't asked me once about how I'm doing. And he says to me, just tell me the rules. I'm happy to follow the rules. Just tell me what to say. I say, there is no rule.
Yeah.
You have to get to know the person to know how they want to be talked to about. So I think it's that. A lot of that it has to do with communication and getting to know people. Another element of it is that, and this could be changing, is that women, according to research, aren't as good at self-promotion.
Right.
We're taught to be group players. We're taught to give credit to everybody who's involved, and you don't say, I did this, I did this, I did this.
Yeah.
And men tend to be more socialized, not only to take credit for what they've done, but for what other people have done as well. And at least this was true in the corporate world in which I worked. And so if self-promotion is expected and you don't do it, then you're seen as not doing anything. So that would be another communication component.
I'm going to go back around a little bit to you mentioned the Super Bowl ad.
Yes.
So you talk about the married couple. What would you say to students who wanted to respond to that? So what would your response be to something like that? What is wrong with that construction?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna deviate a little bit and then come back to the actual answer, because there was a response made by somebody to the most egregious of the Super Bowl ads this year. There was a Dodge Charger ad in which it starts off with a series of men who are completely drained of affect. They're just staring into the screen, and the voiceover says things like, yes, I will watch your vampire movies with you. Yes, I will be nice to your mother. Yes, I will take the dog out for a walk. Yes, I will put the toilet seat down. And then the music swells and he says, but I demand my right to drive the car that I want. And so it's this Charger, blah, and then it says, man's last stand. It's like, really? First of all, was that such a hardship, all those other things you were doing? And secondly, you need this big truck in order to compensate for all your pain and suffering. This is the man's last stand. So I'm appalled at this ad. And then actually somebody told me that a female documentary director made a response to it. And it's the same format. It's these women, affectless women, staring at the screen saying, yes, I will laugh at all your jokes, even if they're not funny. Yes, I will tell you that size doesn't matter. Yes, I will put up with your smelly loser friend who crashes on our couch. I mean, she just keeps going on and on and on. And then she says, and yes, I will sit at the Super Bowl and watch incredibly sexist, misogynist ads and not say a word because you have such a fucking hard life. Well, I thought that was a pretty good response. I mean, so really, one of the responses is to create your own media, and you can do that. Obviously, that's how YouTube started. It wasn't really to put illegal, things shot with your camera phone on there. It was really supposed to be to create your own videos, and so people can do that. What I've said to the students that I talked about, and there were about 4 ads that were like this, is you show them the ad and you say, well, what did you see? What was the problem here that needed to be resolved?
Yeah.
What are they trying to, what are they communicating to you, obviously by a truck, but what's the premise of this? And so actually, I find Aristotle very valuable. Ethos, pathos, logos, and the enthymeme. What's the argument here? And I use print ads in class, and I distribute them and say, identify the syllogisms and the enthymemes in this ad. And of course, most advertising is not syllogistic; it's enthematic. So, so they discover for themselves. And it seems to me that these 4 ads, it wasn't just that they were misogynistic; it was that they portrayed marriage as a complete dead end. It was like, okay, when you get married, you're going to have to go shopping, and you're going to have to pay attention to her petty little rules. And I think one of them said something about have your spine removed. So,
Wow.
really? That's what marriage is about? That just seems sad to me, that that's what they think relationships are. So that's how I use them.
I want to ask you a question that, in a way, you've answered right now, but in a way, I think maybe it's not true, but let's try to figure this out. You wrote, I think, in the early 90s, using some of these magazines, magazine ads, about cultural hegemony in magazine advertisements,
Right.
Particularly women's depiction and
Right.
so on. Has that really changed? You mentioned the YouTube example of trying to counteract it,
Right.
but has magazine ads, has the cultural hegemony just continued to flourish, and is that the Madison Avenue strategy, or what's happening? Or do you think that as a communication scholar or researcher working with students, we've turned the corner on that process?
Certainly in terms of advertising, there has been a great deal of change, but it's shocking how much it stayed the same as well. So in terms of both print advertising and television, you see many more people of color. In some countries, not the United States, you see homosexual relationships depicted or transsexual relationships depicted. So you do see a change, some sort of shift. On the other hand, you still pick up a magazine today that is aimed at women, and you usually have to go through sometimes 20, 25 pages of ads for makeup and fashion. And the ads for makeup and weight loss, I think, are particularly disturbing because advertisers have found increasing ways for women to be dissatisfied with what they look. I mean, I remember when teeth whitening products came onto the market, and I remember, thinking, really? We've lived all this time and we didn't know that our teeth weren't white enough, and now we have to put these strips on our teeth? Did this just happen? Did our teeth get darker, or did we just decide that this was something else that we needed to pay attention to? And so, to that extent, I think women are still being told that their primary value is in their beauty and in their size and in how they look. Look at the number of hair products that you have to do, and if your hair is wonderful, then the rest, is gravy.
Follows.
That's right. So to that extent, I mean, that still is going on. The other thing that I've noticed that hasn't changed is that I've yet to see a print or a film ad that has a man using a cleaning product. I mean, the person waxing the floor, the person washing the dishes. We see men cooking now, which is good.
Cooking.
But not
A
cleaning.
little bit parenting.
Right, parenting, yes.
little
And pick up Parents Magazine. It's Mommy's magazine. It's
Yeah.
not Parents Magazine, right? Occasional special feature on a dad. So to that extent, the assumption that women's primary value is beauty and that the primary parenting and the primary domestic care has to be a woman's responsibility is still being communicated. Again, that doesn't mean that we just absorb this. My husband does all the cooking and he does half the cleaning, and so things have changed. My father just sat at the kitchen table and waited for dinner to be, and that's just because that was normal. So I know that that is shifting in practice, but it isn't shifting in terms of a lot of the messages that we see.
Any last things that you'd like to share that we haven't asked you about? Something that's something in the future that you're interested in, where you want to go with your research, or in your teaching, or even see trends that you see in our field that would be valuable to share with us?
I'm not sure about trends in the field, but I'll tell you a course that I'm just developing, which will illustrate that notion of the intersection of passion and calling. One of my other interests is in children's literature, and I'm very interested in children's literature, even though my children are now 22 and 24, particularly in picture books, because I think that children's literature is, more than any other literature, is written self-consciously to convey certain values to children. And I became very interested a number of years ago in looking at how skewed the images on greeting cards are in terms of children. So at the time that I did this research, which was about 20 years ago, dogs were on boys' cards and kitties were on girls' cards. It was like a law of physics. And certain words were used for boys and certain words were used for girls. Apparently, and all the cards address children directly, to a wonderful son or to a wonderful boy on his birthday, to my darling daughter, to my sweet little girl on her birthday. After one, boys aren't sweet, according to the greeting card industry. You have to find another adjective to use. But the girls got to be sweet and darling well until their 16th or 17th birthday. So I'm interested in how we convey messages to children. And the greeting card industry is one thing, but children's books certainly try to convey certain values in their pictures and in the words and the stories that they use. I'm also very interested in engaged learning, which is, I think, a trend throughout a number of different disciplines. And the notion that you get out into the community not just to do good, but because the experience in the community feeds back into your learning. And I've done a number of service learning classes, but what I decided to do this time was to do an ethnographic narrative theory course that talked about the power of storytelling in communities as a way to build your own identity and your sense of belonging to this community and a sense of the richness of the community. And so I'm lucky enough to be at Loyola Chicago at the Lakeshore campus, which is at the edge of one of the most ethnically and economically diverse areas of the country. I mean, you can walk down Clark Street or Western, and you can hear different languages spoken every other block, and different signs that you don't understand, and food that you've never heard of before. And so I have my students working in a grade school that has over 80 nationalities represented in it. They're working in teaching, reading, and storytelling. They are performing children's literature, so that out of that oral interpretation of literature tradition in our field, as a means of understanding the literature. So I'm not trying to turn them into actors, I'm trying to get them to use performance as a way of understanding the literature. And at the end of the semester, they will write their own children's book. And they're working in tandem with a group of student artists and learning about the power of visual storytelling as well. So I personally love it. The students bounce into class. I mean, they're like, we get to spend all day reading children's books. This is so cool. And they love working at the school. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to work in that kind of atmosphere. So I probably am going to do more with that in terms of research as well.
Good. Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for spending the morning with us, and your week here at Gonzaga has been very wonderful for everybody involved.
Well,
Thanks
for
to
me
Bren.
as well. Thank you.
I'll shake your hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
That's fine.
I'll shake your hand.
I'll just give you a fist bump.
Okay. The terrorist bump.
Yeah.